Hey out there, this is Friday, April 26th, 2019, and it is just about 9:47 here in Northern California in the morning. And today I'm going to get into a lot of stuff as usual. I'm really not much in the mood for pontificating a whole lot, but we'll see what happens here. But I kind of wanted the theme to be, of course, as usual, exposing the evildoers and where their nests are, and fighting the good fight and encouraging the righteous and discouraging the wicked, and putting forth solutions because there are solutions to humanity's problems. There's just a whole lot of people that don't want the problem solved because they perceive that they benefit from the problems because they're wicked. Their hearts are wicked, whether it's advertently, that's on purpose, intentionally, deliberately, with full knowledge and awareness, or inadvertently, which is a lot of people are wicked and they are just they don't care enough. They just take the path of least resistance through life and end up on the highway to hell. They unbeknownst to them, or that's irrelevant. They don't seem to care, so they get what their deeds deserve. If they're indifferent and complacent to unnecessary human suffering, then they should probably expect the same treatment when they meet their maker someday. Now, it's important, first of all, to understand that I kind of go off the rails sometimes in excoriating the evildoers. And I want to make it very clear that we ought not blame people in our local communities. Understand that the problems that you're having in your local communities, I'm talking on a microcosmic level, just in America, let's say, but it's the problems that are stemming from on high. Now, let's talk about a very basic issue like the federal minimum wage. Ask ourselves, why, did the people demand a minimum wage? It certainly wasn't the rulers, because we all know a lot of them are slave drivers and, happy to exploit labor. These are the world famous oppressors and tyrants, and they would have feudalism to this day. This mentality, this caliber of people, if they could get away with it, and they have. And I'd like to point that out with minimum wage, because what they've done is they've incrementally, gradually normalized neo-feudalism, new feudalism. And this is how they've done it very stealthily, is by, first of all, allowing this minimum wage standard to go up in America, a federalized one that unified the nation. It was a federal minimum wage. Now we all know that it's been balkanized and it's been divided between the states. Now each state sets their own minimum wage, and I've even seen cities and whatnot. But you see, these don't have the unifying effect that a federal minimum wage has, where you're free. You know that the economic circumstances are going to be about the same from one state to another, so you could comfortably move around the nation, being that it's your nation as an American, and know that the minimum wage standard is going to be the same relative to the cost of living. But all that's changed the last 55 years, approximately about the time they assassinated JFK. We had a realistic minimum wage standard whereby one person working in the household could comfortably support the whole family with a little leftover disposable income. You could be a homeowner and realize the American dream. You could live a middle-class life on any job that you had. Minimum wage was fine. Anything above that, you're looking at upper middle class. So it wasn't hard to achieve that. And just gradually, incrementally, it's gotten more and more difficult. And it's by design. It's been engineered. These people practice a religion of diabolism. They're very cunning and sneaky and crafty, and they act surreptitiously and behind the scenes to affect change. If you look up this term Overton window, you'll understand what I mean. That they have to they have to be cautious. The frog in the pot of waters is a perfect analogy. In the pot of water, if that you turn the heat up gradually, slowly enough, you can lull them to sleep, mesmerize them, and they don't hop out of the pot. Because if you turn up the heat too quick, of course, they're just going to say, "No way, we're not doing this. We're going to try to run for our lives and escape and jump out of the pot of water." So it would have been the same thing with minimum wage. You see, if back in 1965, let's say, they said, "Look, minimum wage a buck an hour, and with that buck an hour, you can have this middle class lifestyle." Sorry, but next week, get ready. You're still going to make that buck an hour. The problem is it's going to be worth 2.5 cents. What do you think the people would have done? You think they would have revolted? I mean, you think they would have tarred and feathered the politicians? Because it's the politicians that are at the top of this thing. Remember, so I say don't blame people in your local community. I'm not talking about your local city council and supervisors and mayor and all this sort of thing. Even the governors of the state are far less culpable than the federal politicians. And when I slam the mainstream media, and I'm primarily talking about the same caliber of people that are operating on a national, federal level, the syndicated national news. And then, in terms of economics, you can't blame your local credit union, your banks, your local banks. It's from the Federal Reserve. It's the money printing class. Okay, they're causing all these problems. They're debasing our currency, making it worth less through raising the cost of living in a very artificial, unnatural, forced manner. Market manipulation, different colluding groups work together and almost silently. You can see with housing costs. I mean, a landlord doesn't have to have a group of landlords that they meet with to say, well, what should we set it? No, they just look in the newspaper and they say, well, the going rate is that. Well, let me up the ante a little. And, it's, $700 for this apartment. Well, let me up it, to 750. And then the next guy, look, hey, let me up the ante and see what happens here. And this is how it works because investors always want maximum on their return, and landlords, property management companies, flippers, and speculators, investors, they all want the maximum return. It's just logic. It's just what people say. Oh, well, that's capitalism. Well, yeah, if it was capitalism, the thing is that supply and demand would catch up and it would work. In other words, we find easier and easier methods to produce all the things we want and need. So this is automatic. This is just the natural offshoot. This is progress relative to capitalism. So we haven't seen that. So what we've got is anti-capitalism because it's producing the opposite result. We've got crony capitalism, which is basically the antithesis of true capitalism because it produces the opposite results. So today, everything comes down to math. You understand we've got this thing called the CPI, the cost price index, consumer price index, the cost of living. So it can be calculated. It's a mathematic thing. So it's not like the Labor Department doesn't understand math. These people have Harvard degrees often, and they got all the acronyms behind their name. So they can't blame incompetence and say, well, we didn't get it. Oh, now that we see the math, we'll straighten it out right away. Because if they did, you understand what the commensurate minimum wage would have to be equivalent to that $1 an hour 55 years ago. It's mathematics, so nobody can refute it. Nobody can argue it. Nobody can debate it. It'd be approximately, on average across the country, $40 an hour. And as hyperbolic as that sounds, as exaggerated as that sounds, it isn't. It's just fact. It's math. It's nothing anybody can say, well, that's your opinion. No, that's conjecture. That's speculation. No, it isn't. It isn't. It's math. Okay, so there's a reason why this happened. This is by deliberation. This is why I say the Labor Department has been deliberately remiss. So who are they beholden to? Why are they so evil that head up the Labor Department that won't give commensurate cost of living adjustments? They're working with the Federal Reserve, who's doing the math on this thing we call what is your cost of living, and they're excluding certain key items. They haven't been calculating housing costs, for example, which is the source of this chain reaction, cause and effect cost of living inflation, because that's all you need. You just need one key element that none of us can get away from, and housing is that thing. It is that commodity that nobody can escape. You need it to survive. You need it to exist. You need it to live. Hence, that's why we euphemistically call this cost to exist the cost of living. So it's a tax. It's every bit as pernicious as any government imposed government. Okay, because we could define government in different ways. We could pejoratively define government as the politicians and the lawmakers and the bureaucrats and all the quasi and proxy agencies and individuals therein. Or we could define it, which is really the pseudo government, the aforementioned government. But the only true, valid, legitimate government is we the people. Not we some of the people, we all the people. So if we all the people were getting our way, America would have gone the way that JFK wanted it to go, which was the way of peace and freedom and prosperity. You understand? Because in order to have freedom, true freedom, you've got to have prosperity. And Americans have one thing that we cherish and value above all else, it's freedom. So we get that. We understand that there's a key link here between being financially free, okay, and being truly free, to be free and to experience that sensation, that sense of freedom where you're not feeling fear, insecurity. Recently, it's been coming out that Americans are more stressed out than ever. And they do this whole report, this big long report on the mainstream media, but they never say, well, what is the source, and can we, nip this thing at the bud and get to the bottom of it and just eliminate the sources for the increased stress, what's causing it, and attack the cause. No, they talk about how to deal with it. So this is social Darwinism being taught to you in a very stealthy way. No, you got to get tough. You got to get strong. You got to go do yoga or meditate, or you got to, do breathing exercises, or, some other darn thing just to help you to deal with an ever more competitive, more and more traffic, and, how you're going to deal with it, and all this kind of stuff. And it's like, but no discussion at all about what the source of it is, what it is. And I pointed this out. I know it's bugging.